Okay, so tomorrow you're really going to have to use the skill completing the square to write equations of parabolas that do not have a vertex at the origin. The vertex will shift, so completing the square, we have to review it. Okay, so let's just do a visual to help you remember how to complete the square. So let's say that we have a partial binomial, or no, a binomial, and we want to complete the square. So we're going to do a squared plus 2a, and we want to complete the square. So I'm going to say that a is about 3 units long, and then each little unit here represents 1 unit, and this represents a. Okay, a is 3 units long, and each little from dot to dot, that's 1 unit. So if we were going to do a squared, that would be, let me back that up, I can draw a square really quick. That would be, come on, a square. Okay, that's a squared. All right, so that's a by a, so that represents a squared. You know what, I'm going to change this around, plus 2a. Okay, so that means we're multiplying 2 times a, and what we're going to do is split that 2a up into 1 and 1. So this is going to represent, having a little trouble here with my rectangle. Okay, almost there. There we go. Okay, so this is representing 1, remember, and this represents a. So this is 1a, right? And down here, we're going to split that 2a in half, and that represents, come on, there we go, 1a, right? And so that's a by a plus a is 2a, right? But we want to complete the square. And it's not a square right now. What we're looking for is, what is this little, here it is, this little square down here is going to finish out the square right down here. And so what are the measures of that? That's a 1 by 1. So that is 1 squared, and that completes the square. So let's talk about what we did. We took this value, 2, and we cut it in half. So we had, when we split the 2a up into 1a and 1a, and then we completed the square 1 by 1. So let's do another one. Let's say we have x squared plus 6x, and we want to complete that square, right? So we'll just say, okay, so x is going to be a 4 by 4 units, so that's going to represent our x squared, right? So that's x squared, x by x, and then we're going to take 6x and split it, so we're going to put 3 x's up here. Let me resize that a little bit. So that's 3x, and 3x down here. Oops. 1, 2, 3x. Drawing a square, we don't want a square. 1, 2, 3, and x. Okay, there we go. So that'll be 3x. There we go. And now we want to complete the square, right? Because that's x squared. And that's 3x plus 3x is 6x. And so this last one down here is 3 units, 1, 2, 3, by 3. And that's 9. And so we complete the square. Now let's factor it. What does it look like if we were going to write it as a quantity squared? Well, that's just x plus 3 times x plus 3, right? Because the two numbers that multiply to 9 and add to 6 are 3 and 3. All right, so that's a review of completing the square with a little visual. Hopefully the little visual really helped you to solidify your understanding of completing the square. All right, so let's just do some examples real quick. We'll do 10 of them. All right, here we go. So we want to complete the square. and then rewrite as a perfect square. All right, so here we have x squared plus 20x. So we want to split that in half. That's 10, and then square it. That's 100. Factor it out, right? That would be x plus, multiplies to 100, adds to 20. That would be 10 and 10. And since that's a positive 20, it's plus 10 quantity squared. Here we have z squared plus 2z plus something. So we're going to complete the square. Cut the 2 in half. That's 1, and square it. So that would be 1. Now let's factor it. Numbers that multiply to 1 add to 2. That's 1 times 1 and 1 plus 1. So that would be x. And again, it's plus 1 quantity squared. Okay, now we're getting to one that's not quite as pretty. Okay, 7 doesn't cut in half nicely. And it's also negative. Okay, a little harder to draw the picture of that, by the way. But let's go ahead and just cut it in half. So that's negative 7 halves. Now let's square that. Well, negative 7 squared is 49, and 2 squared is 4. So we've completed the square. All we have to do now is factor it. So we're going to take our y squared, and we're taking the numbers that multiply to 49 fourths and add to negative 7, and that would be negative 7 halves and negative 7 halves. Look, negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. 2 times 2 is 4. Yes. And 7 halves plus 7 halves is negative 7. Negative 3.5 plus negative 3.5 is negative 7. So you know, when we're factoring, we just want that number that we've cut, that b term that we cut in half, or that middle term that we cut in half. Okay, let's do the next one. Cutting this middle term in half. That's negative 5 squared, 25, factor it, x minus 5 quantity squared. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5. Okay, so we have a term here that's not easy to cut in half. That's 9 halves. So 9 halves squared, let's square that. That's 81 fourths. Okay, that's a perfect square. Let's factor that out. So we're going to take the z and the squared, and we're going to take multiplies to 81 fourths, adds to 9. And then we're going to use this number right here, positive 9 halves, and there you go. Cut in half, negative 3 halves squared. Now we have to, let's see, that's 9 fourths. Okay, so now we'll factor that to r minus 3 halves squared. Cutting 18 in half, that's negative 9. Negative 9 squared is 81. Factored it out, that is x minus 9 squared. Cut 28 in half, that's 14. 14 squared is 196. Factored out, that is x plus 14. Okay, so now we're coming to some numbers, some fractions that we have to cut in half. Well, don't freak it out. Don't freak it out. Don't freak yourself out. Okay. When you're cutting a fraction in half, instead of dividing it by 2, you can just multiply it by half. So what we could do is take 6/5 and then just multiply it times half. That's the same as cutting it in half, right? And so that would give us 6/10, which we would then in turn have to reduce down to 3/5. So we're going to multiply or square 3/5. So 3 squared is 9, 5 squared is 25. Factored out, we're just going to use this term here. N plus 3/5 quantity squared. Okay, same thing here with 1/10. We're going to cut that in half by multiplying it times 1/2. So that's 1/20 squared. 1 times 1 is 1. 20 times 20 is 400. Factored out, that is x plus 1/20 squared. And there you go. So that's the review. Make sure you do some more practice. I'll put some in the assignments today so you can just really get super good at it. If you feel like you need more practice, do more practice. I'll see you guys tomorrow.